and I think we should begin. So,
Great.
welcome, friends. My name is Stephen Fetter, and I manage the United Learning Program for the General Counsel Office, and it is my delight and privilege to host this gathering of church treasurers every month. Uh, what a privilege it has been to see this group of treasurers gather and grow and support each other and answer each other's questions in the chat and keep writing to Eric and me behind the scenes to say, don't stop, keep doing it. We need more of these. I think this kind of support for the local ministries that are making a difference across the country uh, is essential and an important part of what those of us on the national staff are called to do and to offer. So thank you for your attention to these times. Thank you for your encouragement. Thank you for all of the ways that you write to me and to Eric and others on the leadership team to say, here are my questions and keep this coming, because it it helps so much to know that we are supporting you and that the work and the things that we're doing make a difference. As you know, Eric is retired now, and yet it matters to him so much to offer this support that he is coming back as a resource person for these programs, uh, even though he's no longer on the payroll. And my gratitude to him for doing that too. It's great to work with his expertise and his good humor and even his silly hats. So over to you, Eric, to take us through the agenda for tonight.
Great. Thanks, everyone. And again, I'm presenting tonight as a fellow treasurer. We've got some news to report, and I think we're going to have time for questions too. So let's get going. There's a lot of familiar faces on the call, and so you'll know that I do this odd thing where I show the creed on the screen and talk about how we're called to be church, but then I concurrently do a land acknowledgement. And I just want to say we have presenters, across Southern Ontario today, but in Toronto, we acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, as is the case across the country. We're grateful for the opportunity to live and work here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. And here's the most important part. This recognition must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. So wherever you are in the country, may we bear that in mind. So tonight, we've got some bits of CRA news. We have pending announcements from the General Council meeting, which will be held this Friday and Saturday. I can't say anything officially, but I might drop some hints. And there's been a fair bit of work happening over the summer. There's just some great stuff coming on stream that we'll talk about in terms of new treasurer resources. A lot of you have been questioning these warning messages about dental benefit. We'll cover that. The insurance renewal for December of 2024 is already underway, which is a great sign. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. About half the congregations in the country are active participants. So it took a while to fix that thing, frankly. But I'm really pleased that we're on the new and aggressive schedule that I frankly insisted be the case before I retire. So we are thinking that these webinars might go bi-monthly, depending on the amount of change out there in content. We're also doing a number of custom webinars, and your questions throughout. I want to stress we've got Clyde with us here for any number of the technical questions. The payroll folks are here to respond to anything that might come up in the chat. And there are others from the general counsel office that are often here. So in the chat, there's a lot of question answering that goes on now, even amongst yourselves, to the point where, frankly, Clyde and I haven't had to spend much time going through the old chat for days afterwards, trying to figure out what questions didn't get answered. We're working as a big team across the country. So I have to report on this, and if I sound disgusted, I don't apologize. So the famous underutilized housing tax on manses, where we had the stupid filing requirement. We requested from the relief from CRA. We didn't get it. They had these goofy deadlines. And 2 months after the deadline, the royal assent, there were changes confirmed. So we know that we don't have to file from 2023 onward. We've also seen confirmation. We've seen confirmation of that in writing, where some congregations have actually gotten a note back saying, hey, you didn't need to file this. We're aware of one case where someone filed late and they were assessed the penalty. And we're aware of one case where they said, hey, your form's incomplete, and please resubmit. This whole circus of fuss that created a lot of angst for us and that we had to spend a lot of time on is what it is. Again, the intent is, government can be like the church, where there's good intentions that don't always turn into a smooth procedure. So at this stage, if they're not chasing you, the worst thing you could do is file now, because you'd probably get the late penalty thing for 2022. And if they're not chasing you for anything, I would strongly recommend no action, and just glad to have this whole saga behind us. If there's any folks out there who don't know what I'm talking about, consider yourself fortunate. A couple of recaps. We've already been working with the new T3010, the annual charitable return for this past year. And Clyde and I think we'll probably do an updated webinar on the new form, because we think that'll continue on for a few, at least a few years. But I'm just flagging a couple of changes that were made. And again, this was all royal assent and stuff after the fact, back in June, I guess. So they've simplified the process for voiding receipts, where you can just mark them, and they've also made it official that you can issue them online, although most of us still, or many of us still, do paper. They've also moved a couple of technical requirements, and what I'm doing now with all the resources, for example, the financial handbook is from 2017. I promised folks I would do that before I retired. I had to do a bit of it after I retired, but it'll be coming out soon. And we're going to try to make it evergreen. That is, that it doesn't need updating, that it points you to online resources that change way more quickly than we can ever do with a snail mail manual. So that will be coming up soon. But in any case, these are a couple of simplifications applying to gift in kind receipts, where you don't have to cite the name of the appraiser anymore on the receipt. It probably does. Oh, you don't have to have the middle initial of the donor. But we never did anyway. These are things that they didn't enforce, but they're tidy up things that are needed in legislation. So that's about what I have from the CRA. From General Counsel, there's a meeting this Friday and Saturday. And so there will be official news on a couple of things that affect your 2025 budgeting. I can tell you that there are proposals online. I can't tell you officially, because the General Counsel doesn't necessarily approve every proposal that's put before it. But I can tell you that the group benefit to overall cost, at least in terms of what has been submitted, is scheduled to go up a bit. But it's from, what have I got here? From 7.7 for core benefits to 8.33. So there's a likely increase, even if they didn't accept the full recommendation, there be some increase in core benefit costs that are paid by the employer. The annual economic adjustment that we used to call COLA, cost of living adjustment, there's also been a review process over the summer, and the proposal that's online currently recommends a 2.5% number, which is less than the traditional factor. There's a Bank of Canada CPI common that's been used. So I can't, again, that's what's being submitted, but there will be news next week and the week following to confirm these numbers. And as a reminder, the economic adjustment in particular applies to the minimum salary grid and typically to minister employment agreements where they have negotiated a direct linkage to the minimum, some percentage over or whatever. This guideline is not mandatory for other salaries, for lay salaries and so on. But I say here, remember the golden rule. We do want to be a fair and just employer, and so that's something to bear in mind. The budget tools for treasurers and so on will be updated. I'm sure they've updated them in draft already, but will be finalized pending shortly in the next week or two, and there will be announcements about that coming online. So that's the treasurer type news from General Counsel. So I mentioned new treasurer resources to watch for. There's a payroll one that's going to be announced shortly, a complete update on how to work with ADP and payroll generally. I mentioned earlier the 2025 financial handbook, an effort to make it evergreen and point to online resources. The idea of putting a specific web URL in a snail mail or a paper book these days is pretty goofy because it could change before you even publish the book. So the whole idea, and on top of that, Charities Directorate resources have so improved that if you need to know what needs to go on a receipt or what kind of file retention or anything like that, Googling 1 or 2 words with the CRA Charities Directorate will get you the information you need. And, Clyde and myself and Harry Lee, the new chief financial officer, and others are all available as well. These will all reside on CHURCHx. We've been in response to your feedback. Steve has been overseeing a strategic priority of strengthening the resources for treasurers. So there's a fair bit of stuff that I and others have done. Again, there's a complete payroll module that it has been complete, and I think just needs to get scheduled for its first presentation. And something that we've also need to make sure we do really well, because if you screw it up, it's not good. If you're an ongoing congregation, you don't need to worry about it, but amalgamations and closures is something that we have enough of out there that we want to provide better guidance. So I've got a little pause there. Steve, has anything come up yet in the chat?
The only things that I've seen in the chat so far have not had to do with much that you're talking about. They've all been sort of CHURCHx questions that I've been responding to. So
great. Well, keep up the good work.
If there are questions, by all means, put them in the meeting chat now, and I will certainly relay them to Eric as we go along. The only one that is relevant to everybody is somebody was asking about the PowerPoint slides and would they get copies of them? And the answer is yes, I will post copies of these on the CHURCHx page, as I always do. I didn't get the final version of these slides tonight until I was just getting ready for my church's worship service at 6 o'clock tonight. So I haven't had a chance to convert them to PDF and upload them into the CHURCHx page before our meeting tonight. I'll get them there probably in the morning, because when we're done here, I need to have some supper and then go to bed.
Yeah, and folks, some of the things we're doing with the technical content is putting up the slides because they tend to speak for themselves. You don't have the opportunity, for question and answer. But we'll have a number of webinars where we'll record them if we think there's enough interest for people to sit in
Sure.
and make them a live event. Otherwise, it might be just Clyde and I in a room.
One of my goals when I have somebody who can work with me is to get searchable transcripts of all of these things here too, so that uh, so that you can go and watch the recording, but you can also use the search function at CHURCHx and search through the transcript and find the exact piece of it that you want. I'd like to be able to put some bookmarks on a video so that you know which slide, where in the video Eric was addressing which slide. All of that stuff is coming, and it's just a question of having the time and the brain cells to do that, and having somebody to work with me, I think will make that easy.
Great.
The other question Robert has just asked about that, to access these new modules, people have to have a CHURCHx account. Yes, that's true. We're doing our education on CHURCHx. CHURCHx accounts are free, so it won't cost them anything. And we're not going to put any of these behind a paywall, but we are putting them behind a password so that if you have comments, questions, want to participate in a threaded discussion forum, that kind of stuff, you can know that your comments are not going to be searched by one of Google's robots and turn up in the web in some place you didn't expect.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons we keep these things safe, and it means that we can post content like stuff from ADP that they don't want us to make public, but they are willing to provide to our users, provided they authenticate themselves as having a legitimate access to them. So those are some of the reasons that we're using CHURCHx, and it gives us the opportunity then to present it in an organized way.
Right. I just resisted a temptation to crack a joke that was very inappropriate about internet searches in a certain state in the southern U.S. But anyway, okay. One of the questions that's been popping up a fair bit where people have been getting these sort of alarmist warning messages without necessarily giving you a nice clean solution. Like I say, if I tell you, hey, we've got a problem, I also like to step forward with some kind of suggestion for a solution. So the challenge can be for all systems, for government, for computers, for service providers, when government programs are implemented fairly quickly, sometimes it's a bit of a challenge to keep, for systems to adjust. In any case, the Canada Dental Care Plan seems to be in place and of value to quite a number of people, so good for that. But it does affect our T4 reporting, and there's a code that needs to be input on each payroll record. And Clyde probably knows way more about this only. It doesn't affect the existing payroll processing, but it will screw up your year end. So it's really important that you just go through your payroll records to update this code. It couldn't be much simpler. Even I understand it. So just to say, we've got the screens here on where you go for each employee profile on TeamPay. You go to an additional employee data tab, and again, this is all on slides and stuff, so the idea isn't for you to furiously scribble this down. You click the right arrow to access the second page of the section, and you put in, like, this is all about putting in one number. You put in 1, 2, or 3, depending on what, if any, dental coverage your individual has. Because, of course, if people have dental coverage, then they aren't eligible for this benefit. So there are the screen prints and so on. If you need to double check, then you might want to get a printout. And I see a number of you peering at the small print. I apologize. That's the best I could do with the screen grab.
Eric,
Okay.
before you move on from that,
Sure.
Uh, the secret here is what is available to the person, to your employee, as at December 31 each year. It's not a matter that they've had coverage all year. It depends on what is available to them, whether they take it or not.
Mhm.
And that same number will apply to anybody with a T4A form as well. If you don't offer benefits to them, then it has to be the number one. And if the benefits are offered through the United Church of Canada, as most of you would have them, then it's a number three.
There you go. I told you Clyde would have the best answer. Okay. So I mentioned this earlier. There's a new payroll administrator. So it's targeted for folks who, are new to the program. But I suspect for many of you, it might just, help your confidence or might be a refresher and so on. So it's coming soon. The material is complete. I think there'll be webinars and support for this, and it'll be announced shortly. It'll be coming out through Steve's announcements, as well as other channels, because this is a major item. I just want to say a side remark. Angelica and her team continue to do an outstanding job backfilling and helping people navigate ADP. And I started with the National Church literally by phoning them up and saying, are there really 3,000 treasurers across the country all having to figure out how to do payroll? And now we've got a team that's and more tools and stuff, hopefully making it easier and hopefully making any mistakes less problematic.
Mhm.
A tip, this would be true if you were dealing with a bank or anybody else. When you're getting new employee bank information, writing it down on a slip of paper or something is suboptimal. There's so many chances to make a mistake with routing and transit information and so on. Strongly recommend getting a void check or direct deposit form. You want to give any data entry people the fewest chances to make an error as possible, and so this is pretty standard, not just for ADP or for church or anything, but this is best practice for collecting bank information. Now, something that's happened a fair bit more over the summer than we're used to, or maybe people were reporting it more, but we've had a fair bit of phishing and spam type email out to church treasurers and trying to get bank information or trying to get employee data. I think we're all used to seeing spam, but with AI, it's getting better and better. It used to be that the English was always crappy. There are a number of, we're not going to cover tonight phishing techniques, but just so you know, at the national office, we actually contract with an outside service to attack us and test employees. Because the danger of people responding to this kind of stuff is so high. And we offer training videos, and October happens to be Cyber Risk Awareness Month. So we're just flagging the fact that be very, very careful. You can see your own minister's name saying, hey, I'm in a bind. I need to get some money for somebody right away. Be sure to look at the email. Be sure to hover over the real email to see what it might be, and best to pick up the phone, frankly. So we're trying to communicate as much general information out on this as possible, because there have been a few cases across the country where some pretty significant payroll scams have happened because people fell for this. Treasurers should be, the CHURCHx is sent out to all local pastoral charges. It's the HR newsletter for benefits, group benefits, and pension. And, your church is getting it. But if you don't see this regularly, I recommend subscribing online or finding out who does get this newsletter. It's called CHURCHx and something to watch for. Again, the payroll team is online right now if you've got any more detailed questions. And Angelica thought that the content tonight was simple enough that even I could present it. So any questions on this front? And Steve, if there aren't, that's okay too.
Sorry, folks, I'm trying to let some people into my church because the security system isn't working.
Oh, with your remote access. I love it.
Well, that's the plan. Let's see if it works, right? But my goodness, this is frustrating. But I wasn't paying attention to what you were
Oh,
saying.
well, that's fine. We'll tell you what, if there are any questions in the chat.
Carol is asking, how do you subscribe to CHURCHx? Do you have a link you can give them?
We'll find one and make sure that that answers. I think if you went to CHURCHx, just Googled it on the church website or did a search, they'd give you a link to subscribe to it. But my understanding is that it comes out to every congregation already. Okay, now Steve's going to be distracted, so I'm going to keep going here. We've got time. We will have time for questions, for more questions about anything tonight. I've included a couple of repeat slides here because the whole charitable status thing, there seems to be a bit more reorganizing activity out there with name changes and so on. And I just want to remind folks, many of you are in single point charges. And that means that whatever your church name is, pastoral charge is your local name might be, Trinity United Church, you might be Trinity Pastoral Charge. And you have a charitable number and you file your own charitable return. That's the standard for most charities. The United Church is relatively unusual in in situations where charitable status is held at the pastoral charge level, where the CRA doesn't even know necessarily how many churches are under there. And you need to take some care to make sure that your tax receipting names the charity as well as maybe the local preaching point. So you might be, I'm just going to say Trinity United Rural Newfoundland, and then you might be New Vision United Rural Newfoundland, but some way where you get that information correctly on your tax receipts. If a church in a multi-point situation closes, the CRA almost doesn't need to know or care because you're not on their radar. However, if you do a split, which happens a fair bit these days, where people go out on their own, the points will need to continue to work together because one of them, if there's say 3 sharing a charitable number, and one closes and the other goes on its own, it will need to apply to be a new charity. It's not like you can't just share the number if you're a separate entity. So this is a repeat for regulars. I'm going through it quite quickly, but I want to include these slides as this is the season when we often have new treasurers coming on board, and the multi-point situation is quite unique. And where there are changes, it's quite often you're looking to do a name change. This would need to be filed with the CRA. The official name of the charity, changing that is quite simple. In fact, the General Counsel Office, Mary Worrell and Harry Lee in the Finance Department can do that for you on request. And Susan Jackson usually is the one working with local congregations on these kinds of changes. But they will require a letter from the national church saying, yep, yes, this is one of our internal divisions, and yes, they're in good standing with us. And legally, that's the document that everybody in the outside world relies on: banks, investment firms, payroll companies, and so on. And again, the United Church is unique. I don't believe there's another case in charity land. There's 86,000 charities. We're about 2,000 in some of those. And we're the only ones where our individual churches are unincorporated and have their own charitable numbers, as opposed to just having the same big number and a suffix like 001 and 002 and 003. So everybody else, if any bank that you're dealing with is used to, they'll ask you for bylaws and they'll ask you for your incorporation papers, and you don't have those things. So we need to constantly be explaining that to new bank staff, to new church people, and so on, that the United Church is unique in many ways. So just a quick check if there's any questions on that. And Steve, if you're still letting people in, I can keep going and we can catch up as well. These are this is relatively straightforward content compared to what we often have.
This is helpful. There's some conversation around Connects going on because it looks like it needs a member ID in order to subscribe to the newsletter. Not sure whether that's true, but I can see that you can get previous versions for free.
Yeah, well, it's online. So
Yeah.
If subscribing isn't the way to go, and I apologize,
Yeah.
then you can certainly just Google it, and
Yeah.
each issue is online when it comes up, and maybe that's the best way to do it.
If you go to that link, which I've just posted and which I think somebody else posted too, it will ask you to subscribe. You don't have to, but all the previous issues are listed there and you can download them all.
Yeah.
So that it won't get pushed out to your inbox, I guess, if you don't have a member ID, presumably because the people who set this up want to know that their members are seeing it. But they're all there and available for free, and you can just click on the link.
Yeah, and again, this communication is targeted towards pensioners and people who are group benefit plan employees, basically.
Yeah.
But it's an important document for treasurers to be aware of, because it does contain the latest news and frankly answers to questions that you'll often have to field.
When I get mine, I often forward it to my treasurer and also sometimes to my M&P committee chair, just so that they know.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
maybe your minister would do that too.
Well, again, I tell people that you want belt and suspenders. So if you're relying on one method to get it, just make sure you're getting it.
Yep.
Okay.
Somebody is asking if you could go back to the ADP info slides so that they could write down the information there. I wasn't paying attention to which slide that was, Eric. I'm sorry.
Sure. Well, I'll do that very quickly. We have it in a number. We have it on a number of slides, but as we're chatting.
Sure. And all of these slides will be available tomorrow morning at CHURCHx.
Yeah,
so you can pick those up from there too.
Yeah, and this particular slide is in every deck that we ever do. So I'll just give you a second to jot stuff down there, and
thank you very much.
It'll be repeated at the end of the presentation as well.
Otherwise, okay. I'm not seeing a whole lot of conversation in the chat that we haven't already answered.
Okay.
Again, the group is getting so sophisticated, Eric, they don't need you anymore.
That's fine too.
Questions.
Hey, that's fine too. I have to keep up to date anyway. So again, a couple of these are repeat slides, but because about half, a little more than half of congregations across the country participate in the UCC Protect United program, and where we've been able to offer the premium reductions and so on. Just wanted to share some slides that if you're the treasurer and your trustees look after insurance, you might want to share some of these slides with them. Insurance for your home and so on is always about replacement cost. The whole idea is that you'd like to, have your house. You're not supposed to be better off if there's a catastrophe, but you're supposed to be able to get back what you had. And so that's been the model for many, many years around replacement cost for insurance. But many of you have been saying, well, hold on a second, our church is huge. Our sanctuary seats 1,000 people, and we don't get, we don't need that anymore. So we have been looking at alternate options, and we're very specifically making them available under the UCC Protect program now with this renewal. And so I'll be talking about that a fair bit. While we're trying to save money on insurance, okay, it's driven by, we don't want ever for well-intended volunteers to be in trouble personally, or for the local church to be wiped out when some degree of insurance would have made a difference. But we also have to balance that with affordability. So I tell people that you shouldn't join any charity without checking to see if they have directors and officers liability coverage, and to make sure everyone does, we provide that on an umbrella basis and pay for it nationally. You should have liability insurance even if you don't have a building. Okay, I'm aware of a couple of congregations that meet in a minister's home. But again, it's the world we live in that's so litigious, and if there's a slip and fall, or there's some kind of something happens that where a person has a claim, we do not want our volunteers or our employees to be personally impacted. We need to have that degree of protection as a church employer. So we talk about abuse coverage is something that any organization working with vulnerable populations, be they old or young, should have, and again happens to be built into the national program. There are other companies that offer it, but you typically have to buy it separately. So you also want to be comparing apples to apples when it comes to insurance coverage. But again, it's what you can afford. So, I flagged for people previously that where it's optional, quite most congregations don't pay for, they'd like to have workman's comp for the custodian, but frankly, not for the minister. Again, trying to save some money type thing. And so in provinces where it is optional, most congregations opt out. But this does exclude some people. So some congregations are willing to pay workman's comp premiums for their whole staff complement in order to make sure that even their part-timers that aren't participants in the benefit plan have some coverage. So, and of course, everyone, I think, understands being able to increase or decrease deductibles for insurance purposes. So, what we have in place for folks, and you've heard us talk about it before, is a cyber response call center with a couple of contact names for every congregation. We've provided that to the call center. The treasurer is usually one. And the idea is that if you run into a problem, that's the first place you should go for response, unless you have been able to get cyber risk insurance. The third-party insurance, I continue to receive really, really positive feedback on that being an effective way to make sure that anyone who is paying to use your space should have their own insurance. And that's been expanded recently. Wasn't available in Quebec for a time due to some of the legislative changes there, but is now. So coming up, though, those of you who are in the program, you have the option of selecting a lower face amount now. Like if you're saying that your building replacement value is $4 million, but you would only ever replace with something like $2 million. We used to say, oh, you have to have architect's drawings and you have to have all kinds of stuff. We're simplifying it and saying, yes, you could reduce it to $2 million. We'll do that, and we can offer a 15% saving on the property coverage for that. And if you're looking to reduce it by a quarter, it would be prorated, so it would be a 7.5% saving. And again, those of you who are in the program are going to get your notice this week. I've been told no later than Friday. So you might want to check your email or check with your trustees, whoever your contacts are, because your renewal notice will be coming out this week for December. And I can guarantee you, those of you who aren't insured in the program, you are not getting your renewal stuff nearly as early as this. The insurance sector is dealing with a lot of major claims and stuff, and frankly, rates are expected to go up significantly. And we think the renewal, we have a very attractive renewal right now. Okay, I won't belabor these. These are repeat slides. So we had the customer webinar, which is on the website, and the slides from June of this year. And now you will be getting, you've got a pre-announcement at the beginning of September on this subject. And again, now the specific amounts are coming out. And they're coming out and asking you to confirm, because if there are any changes, we want to get that right. So the idea is that you get a notice now, and if you could respond fairly quickly saying, yes, this is the option we want, and we don't have anything new or different, then we'll be looking to issue the renewal documentation in October. And this is an extract, but this is what the email will look like or include that you'll be asked. You'll have a number that they provide, including the inflation factor and so on a replacement cost basis. Or if you want to select going down to a 50% agreed value or a 75% agreed value, that premium reduction, they'll be offering you that choice. And basically, the renewal will then be processed. Either if they don't hear from you, the renewal will assume that it's this business as usual, that you want the replacement value amount. Or if you have any other changes, we've got about several weeks now to let folks know. And as I say, this is all happening months ahead of prior years, and I'm really pleased with that. Similarly, the service levels are happening. The response time now is where we want it to be. So again, you can do insurance savings with increasing your deductible. There's up to a 15% saving on the replacement cost. Some folks might delete the organ or stained glass, saying that we wouldn't replace that. And so there are ways to, we're trying to identify the ways that you can still do your job as trustees, protecting and managing the risk of loss, but also be trying to save some money. And the participants who joined this at the outset will still be paying less this coming year, than they were in 2021. For those who had premium increases in 21 and 22, we rolled those back at launch, and we haven't yet come back up. So that would be folks who had March or June renewals or September renewals. In any case, I've covered a lot of detail there. I had to include this thing about risk, because you can insure against anything. And hopefully you're not this kind of parent so worried about liability that your kids or grandkids can't have their friends over. Now I've got contacts for all the regular items, and I think now might be the time, Steve, to invite any questions.
Sure, I was just going to suggest that we'll
and
leave that
then we'll
slide
move
up
over to
so
Dave.
that, yeah, we'll leave that slide up so people can write those emails and stuff down if they need to, although a lot of those are also in every slide deck. There's a couple of insurance questions that have come up, and then I want to circle back to some other questions that came in while I was being distracted by my security
Sure.
issues at the church. So Laura says, from my treasurer, if we want to insure for less than um, uh, replacement value, is an appraisal from the last 5 years necessary? And what if we want to just insure for salvage, like demo and cleanup? Is a current appraisal necessary? And if not, how do you know how much that would cost?
Well, certainly insuring for just, I think the short answer to all those things is you don't need an appraisal for any of these things. There will be, if you're looking to maintain a current full proper replacement cost, insurers will ask for appraisals periodically. But at this point, for your renewal, you don't need to do that. And if you're looking to apply to the plan, you will be asked if you have any kind of appraisal. And further on the appraisal, we are going to be going out to each regional council and seeing how much interest there is in having our discount appraisal guy come out and spend days, weeks, months in a region to do them in bulk. We do have a lower cost arrangement now with an outfit based in Alberta that is providing support across the country. But yes, you could choose to insure for just wreckage value, which is and if you wanted to guess, an appraisal will tell you that, but you would still want to insure for some hundreds of thousands of dollars, because even if you weren't replacing at all, there would be a cost in cleaning up the site. But that would provide no coverage at all for any smaller claim, like a broken window or something like that. So what we're working with here is to try to offer some cost savings where you still have insurance with a deductible for smaller claims, which are more frequent. So I don't know if I answered all of Laura's question there. And Laura, you can flip me a note if you've got some specific particulars. I think I know which Laura it might be.
Thanks. And Dave Jagger, who is coming on as one of our presenters a little later, is singing the same song that you did last time you talked about this, Eric, which was treasurers should not make these decisions on their own. Don't wear it. Go to the board or your council and make sure everybody's on side, because you don't want the relationship issues of pointing fingers when the worst happens.
Yeah, no, there's a number of things like that. We talk about what kind of review you have of your financials and whether you can afford to have a full audit. Insurance is like this. This isn't even something that just the treasurer should not wear this individually, and even the board shouldn't. The board should say, should have a conversation with the customer, with the congregation, saying, hey, folks, do we really want to save X $1,000 by doing this? Because
There's nothing more destructive to relationships than finger pointing after a disaster.
No, exactly. And this is where, sometimes we sound bureaucratic, but the idea of having some policy in place before something happens. Yeah. Okay, what are we going to do if we don't, we're doing a capital fundraising and we don't reach target? Dave will tell you that you should state in your materials, hey, this is where the money would go if we fall short. If we exceed it, this is where the money would go. The same thing for insurance.
Because we are communities. We are not just, in this to make a profit. We are communities to take care of each other. There's the minister talking. Yeah. Okay, will we be advised, says Don, when we require an updated appraisal? Is the insurance company going to tell us?
Oh, yes. The insurance company, I've been actually fighting them, pushing back on this. But yes, the short answer is we're trying to, we've been told they need an appraisal every 5 years. And I've said, that's ridiculous. You've never, there's lots of us that haven't done an appraisal in 20 years. What? So I have been pushing back on that. But yes, the insurance company in some cases will demand an appraisal. And you'll find that, again, the UCC program will be a bit more flexible on that. but yes, you would be advised. And this is one of these things where if your church hasn't had an appraisal in the last 10 years, it's probably something you should do anyway. Just good stewardship to know, uh, you know, what it perhaps should be insured for and what your trade-off points are.
Thank you. Paul McAllister is using technical terms I don't know, so I'll just read it straight and you can answer it because I hope you know. What about the co-insurance valuation and the need to have an appraisal for rebuilding 90% clause?
Again, this is a feature that you'll find in virtually all insurance policies. Co-insurance basically being if you aren't insured to replacement value, that your deductible, they will look at, how much insurance you had, and you'll say, hey, the insurance company is basically saying, hey, you've been shorting us all along, and you're going to have to participate in paying the claim. There is the benefit of the UCC Protect program is we've negotiated where that does not kick in for claims less than $250,000. So that basically for smaller regular claims, it wouldn't be a factor. But people should understand that any company you're with has some provision to say you don't just get off paying your deductible if you're way underinsured.
Makes sense. And Laura's just coming back on her question to clarify. So if the insurance is for wreckage value only, it won't cover smaller claims.
Correct.
Yep. Thank you. Stories in the press recently about people with solar panels and things like that having trouble getting insurance. What do you know about that? And our church is having that trouble.
I'm unaware of even there being significant surcharges.
Solar panels and heat pumps, I guess, is the question that Gary's asking.
Well, in both cases, you should declare what you have. For solar panels, for sure, you should declare because to hailstorms and stuff, I guess it's an incremental risk. The breakdown of boilers and heating equipment, is covered. And again, if there's a trigger event,
yeah,
it can't be regular wear and tear, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, there was a story in the CBC news feed I read just the other day saying some insurance companies won't offer this to homeowners for solar panels or heat pumps because they're too new and the companies don't want the risk. But other companies were saying this is crazy. Of course, they've been around for a long time and we will certainly cover them. It sounds to me like the insurance companies you're working with and UCC Protect don't have those kinds of exclusions.
Certainly do not have those exclusions, but it's always good to do. Certainly something like solar panels should be disclosed.
Yeah.
Same way you disclose, any other feature of your building, right?
Sure.
What type of roof you have. Hey, we have solar panels too.
Any other insurance questions, folks, before I circle back to the ones that I missed earlier? Now is the time. I think it's helpful to group them all together. And in the absence of seeing anything come up, a couple of questions that came up sort of fairly early on. Somebody's wondering, any news on the idea of churches getting credit cards?
Well, that's been a bit of a back burner item. And frankly, one of the options that we looked at, these new fintech companies have even gone out of business. So it's been a bit of a back burner item. We can't do it nationally. The banks, the infrastructure to do it just isn't available. So you're more or less on your own. What I've done is continue to use a personal credit card on occasion. My own church does have credit cards, but just reimburse people for use of a personal card.
My church does not have a credit card, and an awful lot of stuff goes on mine. I sometimes wonder what will happen when I leave that church and the next minister comes in without the same credit rating I've got.
Well, absolutely.
Because we should not be dependent on our staff for that.
Yeah, and we're continuing. There's a variety of places where we're pushing for this. The crazy part is this is one of the the downsides of our unincorporated
Yeah.
status. There's a fair number of pluses, but this isn't one of them.
Laura says we had luck getting credit cards through our local credit union.
Yeah. Credit
Cindy,
unions
do you think
are more customer friendly for sure.
So if you can't get it through the bank you're working with, that might be incentive to look around. So Kelly says we got one, but we had to secure it with a GIC at 1-to-1.
Yeah, that's pretty normal.
That's not, yeah. I think we have a revolving line of credit that's secured that way in my congregation. Okay. Beyond the insurance questions then, PayPal fund giving. Do you know anything about that? Anybody used it? Terry says they want us to create a business account, which is overly complicated. We don't quite fit their business model.
This is for PayPal?
Yeah, PayPal fund giving is what Terry's asking about.
Oh, that might be something Dave knows a little more about. I haven't seen it.
I can start on that because I've got people that do have PayPal accounts.
Yep.
Yes, they do want to set it up as a business account, which is a little more complex. And they take a percentage off of it the exact same way that Canada Helps, Tithely.
Yep.
There's a number of companies out there that do it.
I set this up at my congregation and the percentage is a little less than Canada Helps. I think it's 2.2%, but I had to provide charitable documents to prove we were a registered charity, and then I got their charity rate. So they set up my congregation as a charity rather than as a business.
They class that as a business when you're talking to them about it.
Sure, but they give you a lower fee because because you can prove you're a charity. So we've done it. We don't get a whole lot through it, to be honest. It's probably a few $100s a year, but we set it up during the pandemic as one way that people could give electronically, and it was a little cheaper than Canada Helps.
Yeah, I'm retired, so I don't do that.
Pam is asking information on how to get access to our church's CRA account. We used to have a webinar for that. I went searching on the CHURCHx page and I couldn't find it. So that must be so stale data that I don't have a recording of it anymore.
Well, first of all, Pam, if the first test is, does your church have one, and maybe we don't know who opened it. Everybody should have a CRA account. Rose Camborne at CRA Help. I'm pretty sure it's not Helps. It's at unitedchurch.ca. In fact, it's not.
It's on the screen. CRA Help setting up
there it is.
fixed with CRA.
There you go. It's the first one.
First bullet point.
So send an email there, and the CRA has really simplified their processes too. To get one. Everyone went through hell during the early days of COVID on this. So there's basically two things. It's either setting it up initially with appropriate backup, or if you've got one, but you don't know who your authorized person is, there's some hoops you have to jump, and Rose can help you. We have covered this in considerable detail on some earlier webinars, and maybe we should make sure we could tag one of those with that information.
I think so. Okay. I think I'm not seeing a whole lot of extra questions, so I think it's time to say thank you to Eric and to Clyde. We also have with us tonight Dave Jaggar and Karen Sunarine, who are from the philanthropy department. And who knew that treasurers would be interested in philanthropy? But that's the other half of the balance sheet, right? So over to you, Karen and Dave, to bring out your dog and pony show and celebrate with us the joys of income as well as expenses.
Well, I don't have a dog or a pony. Sorry, I didn't.
Darn. Well, sorry, then I'll just cut you off right now.
My camera's on. Am I visible?
We can see you. Yep.
Okay, perfect. That's great. Karen, where are you?
I'm here.
Hey, there she is. Excellent. Do you want to introduce yourselves first?
Sure. Sure. My name's Karen Ryan. I've worked at the General Counsel office just under 10 years now, and my title is Individual Giving Lead. So I support all the individuals who give very faithfully to the church and to the foundation on both sides.
Excellent. And I'm Dave Jagger. I am the Community of Faith Stewardship Support Lead. So I look after the team that's spread out across the country that helps communities of faith, congregations, and beyond that as well, camps, other outreach ministries, that type of stuff, with their own stewardship in order to help make generous people and generous disciples through our work. So that's who I am. We came tonight. I guess originally we were going to talk about planned giving, but we'll talk about that later. We come tonight with a different topic, something that we know that treasurers are pretty much really impacted by and a part of conversations around. And so we want to talk to you tonight for a few minutes about what clergy should know about what people give and who should know how much and who and all those kind of questions, because we keep running into them and my team keeps running into those questions for certain in the work that we do. And I believe they've shown up here a few times too. So we want to talk about that tonight. I'm going to, where's the share button? There it is. And share screen one. And go. Are we good?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep, that looks good. Thanks.
Perfect. I'll have to click that to make it active. So when my team encounters and when I encounter these kind of questions, who should know? What should the minister know? Should the minister know who gives? Should they know how much they give? Why would they want to know that? What are they going to do with that information? When we run into this type of stuff, it often becomes a conversation around confidentiality and privacy, and it quickly becomes a conversation about trust. Those are all very important. But I want to reframe it a little bit tonight in terms of what kind of a church do you want to be? That's really what I think the question is that's behind this. So there are two different documents, and Steve has the links, so he can either put those in the chat or we can get those added to the CHURCHx page. The first is, and that's what this information on this slide comes from, the first is a document entitled, "What Should Clergy Know About What People Give?" And the continuum in the arguments and in the discussions often looks like this. The clergy should know, because they are, in fact, they function like, in many cases, the CEO of a multi-$100,000, $1 million operation, and they're responsible for its care. In any other nonprofit, the directors would have access to this information. The minister should know because giving is a pastoral issue. Giving patterns are signals, like other patterns, of the state of a person's spirit, their soul. Because money is a huge spiritual matter in the life of the church. It's not just about paying the bills. In fact, in many times, it's not about paying the bills. It's about the state of our soul. And how are we as disciples of Jesus growing in our generosity? Ministers should know because, I mean, the opposite argument is that we don't want to give them this information because we're afraid of how it will impact the way they deal with people. We don't want them to deal with the huge donors differently than they deal with the smaller donors. And yet at the same time, ministers hold on to very sensitive, highly confidential information all the time, especially around, I mean, I can think of things like health, right? If you as the local minister find out that Mildred has gone into the hospital because she's had a heart attack, you have to hold that information. You don't just go sharing it with everybody. Similar things in this case. You also should treat Mildred differently then because you know this information. I would hope you would reach out to her, if you're the minister, to check up. How's it going? What's happened? If Mildred has a partner or spouse, how's the family handling this? What's the rest of the story? So you are, as a minister, you're already treating people differently because of information that you have about them. This is a similar experience. Ministers should know because knowing overcomes the false split that exists between the financial life of the congregation and the spiritual life of the congregation. They are not anywhere near as separate as we make them out to be. And it helps to shatter the conspiracy of silence for the spiritual health of the people in the congregation. If we want our congregations to be places that care for people and help them to grow in their faith and to grow deeper in their walk with Jesus, then we need to be more focused on helping care for their spiritual health. And money is a huge part of that. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, we always hear arguments like, well, they shouldn't know because we don't really trust them. We're not sure what they're going to do with that information. Again, as I've mentioned, it could lead to favoritism. You know, the ministry will spend more time with the people who give more money. May actually be the opposite. Well, they shouldn't know because, well, they and the rest of the congregational leadership, you know, money is this temporal thing. The stewards look after that. The session looks after the spiritual life of the church in the old model. That's not the case. And of course, it could cloud their judgment. That's that whole thing of how will they treat people? Will they start to treat them differently? I think you may be starting to get the idea that we recommend that ministers need to know some things in order to do their job well and in order to help care for the people who are part of that congregation and beyond. So our recommendation is, and there are ways to do this that also help protect that privacy and confidentiality, but when anyone makes a first gift to the congregation, that's a sign that that person has increased their level of commitment to the congregation. This is a statement of faith, not just a statement of finance. So the minister should know so that they can thank them. And whatever process you have for thanking people kicks in at that point. They need to know, hey, somebody just grew, took a step in faith. They gave us some money. When someone starts to give regularly, whether that's PAR, envelopes, Canada Helps, post-dated checks, whatever, but when someone starts to give regularly, again, they're making a statement about their relationship to the congregation. They're growing in their faith. They're stepping up. The minister needs to know that that's happened. And then the third instance would be any time that there's a fairly significant change in their giving pattern, whatever that is, up or down, whatever. If someone suddenly starts to give a lot more money, something's going on there. If someone stopped giving or has greatly decreased their giving, something's going on there. There's a pastoral issue that needs to be addressed. Obviously, the minister is not going to go to that person or to that family and say something like, well, we noticed that you aren't doing this anymore and we want your money. It's not about that. But we care for each other. That's what disciples do. That's what a church is about, a big part of it. So when some significant change happens, we need to be in touch. We need to be caring. We need to be there. Just as if someone stopped attending on Sunday morning, same type of thing. They're sending a message. We need to respond to that when it happens. So those are the kind of things that we recommend around giving. And Karen, you've got a story. When Karen and I were talking about what we were going to do with this tonight, she told me this story, and I was like, you have got to tell that story. That's a great story. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen so we can see Karen. And can you tell us your story, please?
Sure. So this was a few years back when we were going to a church. I had about 5 kids. We did fostering, so the amount of children we had were different at all different times. And I was brought up in a church my entire life, and my mother taught me to tithe. She was a single mom of 2 kids, and that's just what we did. And so my husband came home one day and had lost his job. We had 5 kids, not a lot of money. And this was obviously very upsetting. He didn't lose it in a good way. He was like kind of walked out. So there was no money coming in. And so right away, we stopped our pledge at church. We stopped everything. And within about, I guess it was a week or so, my minister came to the door. And she came in and she said, listen, I just spoke to a few people. And no, she just said, here's a check. They wanted to give me some money. to help support us through the next weeks and months, of our daily life since David lost his job. And I felt so bad. I felt so guilty because I said, you're taking that money from people who are starving on the street. You can't. She said, no. I just went to a few people and they gave some money and they wanted you to have this. And it was a check for just under $2,000, which is quite a bit of money going back 20, 25 years ago.
Oh.
And, we were very moved. The thing was, my minister knew what I gave and knew that David and I tithed and knew that we gave regularly. And because she knew that our tithe had stopped, like totally, she knew something was up. And then she went to a few people in the church that she knew had money that could help support us. And we were very involved. So all the people knew us. And so they were able to give that money to me. Now, she hadn't known. It might have taken months for her to find out. I don't know, but it was nice that they were there for me and it was right when we needed it. It was definitely a God thing. And so that is one reason why a minister really should know these types of things.
Yeah, can you imagine how that would have gone otherwise? Like you said, if the minister didn't know, they wouldn't know. I was talking with a colleague and friend of mine when we were talking about, oh, we're going to do this webinar where we're going to be part of the treasure webinar. And I told them what we were talking about, and they had that opposite experience. They had the experience of a time when their spouse lost their job, and therefore the family stopped giving, and no one noticed. So nobody came to check on them and support them. Nobody came to ask them how they could help. They just fell through the cracks. And they felt that their church did not care for them.
Yeah.
Which is why, as I said at the beginning, we're kind of rephrasing this question into a question of what kind of church do you want to be? Do you want to be a church that is really caring for its people and the people it encounters? This is one way that you can get better at that and grow in your caring and loving and watching out for each other. Going back to the slides. So as I said, there are two documents that Steve has the links for, and he'll put them up someplace, what clergy should know about what people give, and also what clergy should know. So there's a sample privacy policy. This may be, Eric mentioned earlier, it's good to have a policy in place before, rather than to catch up after the fact. So this is a sample of what your congregation might choose to use. Modify it for yourselves, please, around privacy and who knows what. That way, again, the secrecy disappears, the veil is lifted, and now we know who knows and what they know and why they need to know it, so that we're much more upfront about how we work with our money and our giving, which also gives those who donate to us confidence to give money because they know it will be handled well. Our favorite book, Not Your Parents' Offering Plate by Cliff Christopher, talks about, this is one of the things that he talks about in that book. So if you want to read something to get some more depth or background, we always recommend Not Your Parents' Offering Plate. Karen's told her story. Steve, have I got time to tell mine?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So as a minister, in the last congregation I was serving before I came on to be general council staff, we had this conversation. And when I began my ministry there, and for the, I don't know, 15, 20 years before all this happened, it was my opinion as a minister that I didn't want to know who gave how much. Because all those things I talked about, how will I treat people? How will people think about the fact that I know? Will this change the way they give? Was all running around in my head. And I think it's in a lot of my ministry colleagues' heads too. And I read the book, Not Your Parents' Offering Plate. And the way that he talks about it, as we're talking about it, this is a pastoral issue. This is a spiritual issue. This is a way that we care for our people. I realized I need to know. And so I changed my mind about it. Now I need to know what to do. So then I went and I offered the book to our chair of finance and said, you might want to read this. This is a really good book. And he took me up on it. And then we talked and he said, you need to know. I said, yes, I do. So we took a motion to our board that the minister, not just Dave, but from there on, the minister would have access to that information, who gives and how much, in order to do good pastoral and discipleship work. What intrigued me then when I went and looked, and it took me about 3 months, I had to get my head around this, but when I went and looked at that list, there really weren't any surprises. We already had a sense of who was giving how much. The closest thing to a surprise that I encountered was not who the largest donors were, but who was giving nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Because often those people who were giving nothing were some of our most vocal people. And so then we could talk about commitment. We could talk about discipleship. We could talk about giving and generosity through sermons, through newsletters, and the odd time one-on-one, to help them grow in their faith and to help strengthen our church. So it was a good experience all in all. But it took me time to get my head around it in order to be ready to do that.
Well, let me just interrupt for a minute.
Yep.
To say that the links on your PowerPoint are actually behind a security wall, so that
Okay.
people without a staff access can't see them.
Thank
So
you.
I will download them and input them into CHURCHx and
Perfect.
add them there for folks tomorrow.
SharePoint has changed its settings on me again. Great.
Sadly, we have this struggle all the time, which is one of the reasons that we put stuff in CHURCHx for the members of groups like this. So I'll look after that for you, Dave, but it won't happen tonight.
Great. That's fine. Thank you. So that's kind of what the bulk of what we wanted to say. Karen, is there anything you want to add or chime in around? Karen.
Oh, Karen's gone.
Karen's gone.
So let me add something then.
Yeah, you do.
Because this is an issue that comes up not only in philanthropy conversations, but also in the boundaries trainings that we do with ministers.
Yes.
And somebody in the chat said, should this be discussed with ministers? Let me tell you, it is. That all of your ministers are required to do training in our ethical standards, as well as in general boundaries. And all of those courses are available to them through CHURCHx. I helped to write a lot of those courses, so I know the content of them. And there is a course specifically for boundaries around finances and givings. I helped to teach that course for several years, and these kinds of issues are talked about with your ministers as well. So I would say that most of our ministers, 95% of our ministers, are highly trustworthy, deeply important to the life of the congregation, and you should not be afraid.
Yep.
I would also say that, like any other appropriate denomination, we know that people are created good but fallen and in need of redemption. And so we have policies and procedures to deal with ministers who cross the line, whether they're crossing the line in financial boundaries or in sexual boundaries or in pastoral care boundaries or any of those things. We're part of a big organization that has ways to deal with that if anybody breaches trust. This is only one of many ways that breaches of trust happen. It happens rarely. It does happen, and we need to take that into account. So that's the job of our colleagues in the Office of Vocation. I'll get out of your way, Dave.
No, thank you. That's great. I guess the other thing that I would like to remind everybody about while I'm here tonight is the fall offerings we have in stewardship training through Called to Be the Church, The Journey. Our introductory course, Getting Started in Stewardship, will be running on October the 8th and November the 20th. There are 2 time slots on each. In a minute, we're going to show you the page on CHURCHx where you can go to sign up and get more information. Stewardship Best Practices is our in-depth stewardship training. You need to come to that with a team ready to work together. It runs for 5 weeks. To phase 1 is 5 weeks from the week of October the 21st to the week of November the 18th. And there are different dates and times offered by each of my team for the different regional clusters that they serve across the country, although you're allowed to cross boundaries if the times work better for you. At the end of stewardship best practices, you will have a annual stewardship plan set to go. And then after phase 1 is over, for the rest of that year, from when you started, you get training and you get ongoing coaching from your regional community of faith stewardship staff person in order to help you implement that plan that you've put in place for your stewardship for that year. So it's a really great course. Congregations benefit hugely when they do that, but you have to have a team to get ready to do it. So that's why we recommend starting with getting started in stewardship, because that'll give you those little foundational things you need and help you get your team started. The annual giving program is something that congregations should be doing. And so to help you do that, we have set up your giving program. Again, this is a team sport, so you need to come with a team. In the past, we were running this in January for those who wanted to do a giving program in the first half of the year. This year, we're doing it in November instead. So that way, those who want to do their giving program right away in January are all set and have time to get there and get their stuff set up. So it will be running, again, there's 2 choices, November 19th or 20th, and December 3rd or 4th. So the one date in November and one date in December, and the times are different depending on what you choose. We're trying to cover the whole country here, so time zones become challenging from Newfoundland all the way to BC. And then our final course that's up and running at this point is the Bequests and Estate Giving course. This is your chance to learn about planned giving and to set up the planned giving program that every congregation should have so that people can make gifts to you from their estate, from their wills, and there's lots of other choices and ways to do it. You can help promote it, and your congregation can benefit from that kind of giving, as well as those who are giving benefit from that kind of generosity. So the in-person bequest and estate giving is running on October 16th and 30th in the afternoon. These are all Eastern time, by the way, that I've been saying. But there's also a, what do we call it? Do-it-yourself course.
Yeah.
Where
On-demand course.
On demand, that's what it is. Thanks. Where the videos and things are on the CHURCHx page, and you can do it whenever you're ready for it and at your own rate. So if those dates don't work for you, then sign up for the on-demand course and you can do it whenever you're ready to do it. It does not require a team, but we highly recommend a team because that way you'll actually get things to happen. And either way, you have support from your local stewardship support staff to help you make things go. Karen was going to tell us as well. I'm sorry that she stepped out. I know she wasn't feeling well today, so I hope she's okay. But she's going to tell us that we're also working on a new module around her work to help support congregations in major gift, major donor work, and helping, set up some levels of giving and thanking programs and how to work with people in that way as well. So that's something I don't know when I would say, look for it in 2025. But it's on the way and we're working on putting that together. So lots of ways that your congregation, your community of faith can grow and in its stewardship work and learn the important stewardship lessons and practices that we all need to be doing. So I hope you'll be able to take advantage of some of those, and we'll see you. Steve, you're going to show us the CHURCHx page, please.
I am, yeah. So Karen dropped out quite unexpectedly, so I suspect the issue is simply that she had a power failure or something like that.
That could be.
So that happens in my business, and that's why we often have 2 of you instead of just 1 who are teed up to present. So thank you for pinch hitting and tag teaming. So here's the front catalog of United in Learning, all the programs that we offer, and you can see we've tried to make it a little more clear that a bunch of these are collections. The one icon that we haven't changed into a collection yet is Dave's, and that's called To Be the Church, The Journey. But it is indeed a collection, and if you click on it, You will get this infographic here. You'll get a blurb. You'll get a video, got a little bit of a cheesy video with Dave being kind of cute. Watch it. It's fun. And then there's all the courses that he's talking about. So Dave, do you want to tell people about it, or do you want to just point them in that direction and move on?
I think they can go and find that and it'll explain what they need and the details are all there.
Be sure you look at the cheesy video.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We had fun putting it together.
You sure did.
Yeah, good. So thank you. That's my piece. Thanks again for the work that you all do.
So,
You help make
questions.
the money happen and flow, and we appreciate that.
So questions and thoughts and comments. Dave will just hang on to you for another 2 or 3 minutes while those come in. Arlene is saying, how many people should be on a stewardship team?
Depends on the size of your congregation. Probably you don't need more than 4.
Yeah, I've asked for
Maybe
3 in
3.
my tiny little congregation.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
figure
the people you put on a stewardship team or a stewardship committee, committee's nasty worded now, but the people you put on a stewardship team don't have to be you folks, the treasurers and the finance folks. It's good to have a relationship back and forth between the stewardship side and the finance side, but they don't have to be on the team together. I've started to think about the stewardship team in many ways as the cheerleading team for the congregation. So who are the people who have their finger on the pulse of the congregation? Who can tell a great story about the amazing ministries that you're doing? Who's good at that kind of communicating? Who can write a good letter of invitation? Those are the skills that you're looking for. Who's that person that is just naturally good at thanking people? Who if you did something, they're going to write a little thank you note. Those are the kind of folks to get involved in this.
I have found in my
And the minister.
I have found in my work that when one person from a congregation comes to a webinar, they go home and say it was interesting.
Yep.
But if 3 people from a pastoral charge come to a webinar, they go home and change their church. And 3 seems to be the critical minimum.
Yep.
So, next question from Joan. For a long time, we told givers that information on their givings is not given to anyone but the envelope secretary. This kind of change would need discussion and approval from donors. Would it be good to have an opt-out clause for people if needed?
Certainly an opt-out clause would not be a bad thing. That also tells you something. When we're thinking about this as a way into people's spiritual lives, what's going on there? Certainly. And yes, this needs to be a conversation. It shouldn't be we got together once, talked about it, and made it happen. Even in the story that I told of my experience, it happened over months. I had to read a book, the finance chair had to read, we had to talk, we had to come back and forth. Yeah, it's a healthy part of life in the church.
Nobody in my congregation is surprised at what I know. In fact, everybody assumes I know more than I do because I don't go ferreting out the information. But they assume I know, and they're not worried about it. So, comment here, Robert is concerned, and I think the conversation shows, Robert, that you're not alone in that. This is an important question, and there are people all over the map.
Yep.
Although certainly the direction that Dave's team is recommending is the growing consensus around what makes for effective ministry.
Yeah.
We're running out of time. Any last minute new questions? I'll give you 30 seconds. And otherwise, put your questions in as I bring us to a close. Welcome back, friends. Who knew that even having a webinar in July would give us an hour and a half's worth of stuff to talk about in September? As Eric always says, we're grateful for your ministry, and this is ministry. This is ministry that you do. It's often hard work. It's often detail-oriented. It's often exhausting. It's often related to conflict, and it often goes unrewarded or even unrecognized. But our churches would not be able to do anything else if you weren't doing the work that you do faithfully and carefully and prayerfully and well. So thank you for your ministry, for your attention, for your time tonight, for your questions. Keep them coming, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Eric, did you want to say any last words before we close off?
No, just thanks everyone. Right now, absent more stuff happening, we're thinking we might be going bi-monthly. We don't want to. We've already reiterating some stuff here, and we also think that there's going to be more time for ask us anything type scenarios. So Clyde and I are trying to get our courage up, ready to do that with you folks over the coming months as well. But thank you for what you do, and the topic that Dave just spoke to, I've been a proponent of sharing that information for many years. The top ministers I know do that, are recommended as well, but it's also a tough discussion locally. I can tell you it can be a very tough discussion locally. So there is a comment about finding the book. And Dave, we should have maybe even look to see if the books, our own bookstore can carry it or something, help people get their hands on it.
I believe our own bookstore does carry it. UCRD has it.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Great.
So
Okay, anyway,
we'll
thanks
get those
everybody.
links posted for you, but as I say, I can't get them up tonight.
Yep.
Good. Thank you, friends. Good to
Okay.
have you with us, and we will look forward to seeing you the next time. We'll
Great.
be back in touch with you shortly around when that will be.
Thanks, fellow treasurers.